our story for this week. The great revolt that's described in our Parsha Korach. It's kind of like the biblical equivalent of a rumble in the jungle. In many respects, it was more serious than any of the other challenging episodes that are described in the book of Numbers, which has a fair number of challenging episodes. For one thing, it was a revolt which was initiated by leaders rather than by the people, as was the case in all the previous instances. And for another, whereas other complaints centered on external conditions, such as the conditions you would expect in a harsh desert, the unavailability of suitable food and water, or concerns about the ability to conquer the land, this revolt was directed at the role of Moses and Aaron. And true, yeah, there is a whiff of family brokers about this whole thing. Korach was Moses' first cousin. He was a very able and wealthy man, and he had been overlooked in a number of leadership roles, and he was upstaged by younger cousins. That's enough to get any family at each other's throats. And the fact that he was ambitious and arrogant and opinionated, there's absolutely no doubt. But nevertheless, the challenge that he leveled against Moses was based on a deeply populist grievance. There's only one statement we hear from him in the whole of the Torah. And he says, the entire community is holy and God is within them. Why then do you elevate yourselves above the community of God? And in a sense, of course, he's right. Didn't God declare to the whole nation at Sinai, you shall be a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests, a goy kadosh, a holy nation? Surely, therefore, based upon that testimony from God, we're all holy. And you see, like all successful populist politicians, Korach is able to identify the raw nerve of disenfranchisement among the people and their resentment of privileged success, which was epitomized by Moses and by Aaron. And it's precisely because the arrow strikes so close to the mark that Moses is rendered helpless, and he has to turn to God to seek his support. So the story goes on to describe the signs by which God will prove that Moses and Aaron served by his appointment, that they didn't seek high office of their own accord. First, there is an invitation to all the rebels to bring an incense offering, and only Aaron's is accepted. And then there's the story of the staffs, and again, only Aaron's buds and flowers. And then Korach and his co-conspirators are swallowed alive in the ground, miraculously, as it opens under them. So it's quite clear from the text that the offense of Korach and his followers is that they challenged not just Moses and Aaron, but they actually challenged divine authority. God did not appoint you as leaders, you appointed yourselves. That's their claim. And that's a very dangerous assertion for the success of the Jewish mission. And therefore, it's dealt with in the very strongest possible way. But if you look very carefully at his statement and the subsequent response from Moses, there doesn't appear to be an answer given in the Torah to Korach's claim that the entire community is holy and that therefore there's no need for leaders. So I'd like to suggest that Korach's assertion that all the community is holy represents no less a danger than the one that challenges the divine authority, but for a different reason. Because while it is true that we are all holy in our essential selves, in the sense that we all possess a holy soul given to us by God, there are surely differences between us in respect to the extent to which we realize this holiness in our daily lives and conduct. We're not all the same in that regard. And as a matter of fact, at Mount Sinai, God did not declare everyone to be holy. Rather, what he did was he placed into the world the possibility of achieving holiness. And when you look more carefully at the book of Leviticus, God commands, Kadoshim tiyu, you shall be holy. You shall be holy is a command. It's not a promise or a declaration of an existing fact. It represents a potential, attainable, if you work really hard at it, by commitment to a lifestyle, to 613 commandments, to the whole bank shooting works, which is laid out in the Torah. But the implication is that right now, you're not as holy as you could be. If everyone is equally holy, then there's no role in this world for inspirational leaders who are going to offer us tantalizing visions of what we or the world can be, to inspire us to stand on tiptoe, to reach new heights. If we're all identical, there's no competitive urge, the driving force behind all innovation. And spiritual life becomes smug and self-satisfied and self-regarding. Spiritual striving becomes stultified. And of course, Judaism dies in the process. Because even beyond the spiritual, in other realms, remove growth and challenge from the human condition, and all human advancement grinds to a halt. And that's the essential fallacy in Korach's challenge, and why his notion of absolute spiritual equality represents such a threat. It's a hugely enticing idea, and one, by the way, that centuries later a Jew called Karl Marx will morph into a political ideology, and one that will affect half of mankind, challenging the principles of diversity, individual freedom, and achievement. Well, the sterility of Korach's ideology is actually quite succinctly summed up in his name, as well as in the actions that God commands to disprove its validity. The name Korach means bald. And just as sadly, as many of us will know, no hair can grow on a bald scalp. So there is no growth that can emerge from spiritual sameness. And the fire of the incense and the burning coals represents upward striving, just as flames strive upwards. And Aaron's bone-dry staff blossoms to teach us that even those who on the surface appear to have no special qualities, dry as a bone, but with effort can blossom and thrive, because within every human being, there is the potential for growth. And finally, the punishment of life, destined to life in the grave, to be buried alive and to remain alive in the grave, I think is to teach us that being stuck down a deep hole without the opportunity to clamber out may still bear a passing resemblance to life. But is it the type of life you would truly desire? Shabbat Shalom.